Today, my guest is former WWE developmental talent. You may remember him as Fletcher Chase, or if you were in the OVW area, you'll remember him as Gavin Garrison. Jason, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I've watched a couple episodes. I've seen a few of my buddies on there, and always love hearing everybody's sort of tales on what development was like for them. I know it was always something different for everybody. Time frames are different, are as different as the individual personalities are. So, yeah, it was always, I think, a blast, and there's still a lot of guys from my time, that I'll still talk to and laugh with and all of that. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
When did professional wrestling first come into your life?
I grew up in St. Louis, so like big sports town, baseball. We didn't have a football team at the time, but my dad was always into wrestling as a fan. Like we used to have prior to me, although I think it's back now, but they used to have wrestling at the Chase in St. Louis, which was like a big deal. Like people would go there, like they would go to the theater, like it was like the place to be in like the 70s and the early 80s. You would just go there. That was like part of society. You'd go, you watch the matches, you'd go do whatever else, but it was a big deal. As anyone who's a fan knows, especially from a territory standpoint, everything kind of big blow off angles and such would all kind of would a lot of times happen in St. Louis, and you'd have these big stars from all over come in. So my dad was a fan of that, and then WWF in the mid 80s, we were watching as kids. I was born in 83, so we were watching as kids. And then I went to my first live event in 1990, which I remember very vividly. And then after that, it was just kind of like we were fans before that, but then seeing it live, it's like, okay, it's a different level. So my brother and I were huge fans from that point on. Pretty much strictly WWF because that's really always some WWF, some WCW. My brother later on gravitated towards WCW. I was WWF, so we had our own little kind of thoughts on that. But yeah, pretty much like it was just constantly present. It was always on, so we just would gravitate towards it.
At what age did you decide that this was something you were going to pursue?
Probably in high school. I think like a lot of people, like being a fan kind of goes in waves and in
Hmm.
cycles. It's like you're into it, then you kind of fall out of it, or life gets in the way. You're interested in other things, or sports, or school, or whatever it is when you're young. I kind of fell out of being a fan probably like mid 90s, and I would like check on it all the time. My brother was like staunchly always a fan, so he'd always watch. I'd always kind of like dip my toe back in. What's going on? I'd kind of trash it, but then I'd be like, "What's happening?" And I'd watch it for a second and kind of like move on. But like most people in the late 90s, like Steve Austin was the reason I started watching again, almost exclusively. And then you see everything else that's on. Like I always kind of joke around with buddies of mine that are fans now or watch now. But like, man, I we grew up at a time when like Steve Austin and The Rock were on free TV like
Hmm.
every Monday night. Like, wow, we didn't even know what we had. But no, so like from the late 90s, I was in high school, and then when I went to college, I had already made up my mind. I already kind of had a plan, so everything was kind of geared towards that. I was like, go to school, get my degree, but while I'm here, take some acting classes, take some different, focus on getting into the right kind of shape, just do all that prep work while I got some time, save some money and everything else. Plus living in St. Louis was close to Louisville, which was like, at least in like mid 2000s, was the place to go just to get a contract, or at least just rub elbows with contract guys, or just spend a little time learning the right way.
Hmm.
So that was kind of my plan, probably from like high school, college.
So, when did you make the move? Was OVW the first place you trained at?
I think it was the only place I trained
Hmm.
at. I'd never trained before. My first, I think like I was like 23, maybe. It was like the year after I graduated college. I was just like working, saving my money, and it was 4 hours away. So I drove there one like Saturday morning. I left at like 3 or 4 in the morning, got to Louisville just in time for like one of Rip Rogers' classes. Because I communicated with him over the phone. He's like, come up, watch class, see if it's anything, see how you feel then. And then you walk in and it's like, okay, so you just kind of shut up. People are training, it was like drills and then film. And it was very serious. Like Rip was serious, the guys were serious. It was like they were treating it just like they would treat like football practice or college football or anything like that, because it was like Rip didn't screw around. Rip was awesome. I know you've had him on
Hmm.
this, and I know Rip was amazing. So you literally just kind of keep your mouth shut, try to follow what he's talking about. But I wasn't there to train that day. I was just checking it out. So yeah, after that, I was like, okay, yeah, that's the place to go. The contract guys were still there, so it wasn't. I think the contract guys pulled out like '07, '08 to go to Florida. So I came in to OVW like 6 months before the contract guys pulled out. I was in the beginner class and everything else, so I didn't really have much contact with those guys outside of going to TV or going to the shows or just kind of hanging around in the background. But yeah, to me, it was like not only the best place to go because that's where developmental was, and you could still do beginner and possibly get signed just by being a walk on. But also like it was close in proximity. It wasn't a huge cost of living to live there. Very similar kind of Midwest, so it's like going from St. Louis to Louisville wasn't a culture shock. It
Hmm.
wasn't like a brutal on the wallet or anything. It was just basically the same. So yeah, for me, it just made the most sense because it was like cost the least to get there. Could get set up, get an apartment, get a day job, like pay the bills and everything, and then put all my other time and energy into wrestling, which was awesome. Like what you couldn't want anything more.
What was your initial thoughts of actually stepping in the ring and starting training? Was it
That was
harder than
cool,
what you
man.
thought?
It was different things were harder
Hmm.
than maybe what I thought. Like I think I'd done enough research and I like to know that it was like when I went in, I'm like, they're gonna try to like beat the hell out of you, beat the hell out of anybody else. And they should like, cause you still had like a lot of people joining beginners classes, not being a dick, but it's just like, you didn't come ready. Like you had to
Hmm.
come prepared because you're doing, all the warm ups that you're doing and running the ropes. And when I started the beginners class, Tank Tolan was teaching, and Tank was a great guy, and I think Tank was a little bit more patient with people coming on. Um, and then he switched pretty soon after with Joey Mercury. And Joey's very serious about like if you don't want to be here or if you can't be here, like it wasn't sugar coated. It was like very black and white, which to me was fine because I just tried to make sure when I got there I was in the best shape I could be in. I tried to get everything on point just because I figured that would be easier
Hmm.
because like I had no idea what to expect stepping in the ring. So it's like if my wind is good and I can fill in these blanks right now while I learn this over here, but getting in the ring, taking bumps and running the ropes and that kind of thing came easier to me than I thought, only because I just would mimic. I'm a
Hmm.
decent mimic. So I just did what I saw millions of thousands of times, whatever. So I just did that and I could go through the motions pretty well and just get like the basics down pretty fast. And I had always done like comedy, improv, and theater stuff. So I was okay talking. I was like, I can cut promos too. So because that was a big part of the classes as well, even beginner. It was like, that was as important as anything else. So I think like for me, it was more of like there's a culture, there's a way of doing things backstage. There's all these sort of like not ritual, I guess sort of like you shake everyone's hands. Like there's a very clear way
Hmm.
to behave. So that to me was like, oh, interesting. But um, yeah, nothing in the ring, at least from a beginner standpoint, it was about probably what I expected, but that was just because I tried to read like every horror story about it possible, just prepare myself for like every possible thing. I think
Hmm.
if you go in there and you've been a fan all your life and you don't mind getting a little beat up,
Hmm.
yeah, helps in your early 20s. So it's like, okay, I can do this. Not I can do this. Not it was more just like, okay, like I can manage through beginners class and then we'll see where we go from there. So did the beginners class with Joey, who was amazing. Like I thought he was a really good teacher and a really like just really smart about everything. So like that turned into the next level, sort of the RIP class. And the contract guys were gone by the time I went from beginner to the intermediate level. There used to be beginner, intermediate, which was RIP, and then contract guys, which I think at various times could be. I think Al Snow was might have been the last one to teach it before the contract guys left and went to Florida. So once the contract guys went to Florida, like basically the intermediate class was kind of thrown into the spots on OVW TV and OVW house shows. And that's where you just start learning
Mm-hmm.
because if you're just with the guys in your class, you can get better mechanically, but you're not really learning like that next big thing because you can only learn those things if you're, hanging around with guys. Like if you're riding to the house show with Joey and he's telling you, his experiences, you're going to learn, oh, okay, cool. How can I apply that? Oh, that makes sense. Where can I fit that, when I'm out there? Uh, so yeah, to me, that was really where it all kind of took off in terms of like understanding more than just mechanics. And
How,
mechanics can always get better, but I mean, like OVW did such a good job of
mhm,
drilling like muscle memory and mechanics that like if you trained with Joey and you trained with Rip, you were fundamentally at least going to be
mhm,
pretty solid. Like if they were like, yeah, okay, yeah, he fundamentally can do these things, you're in a pretty good spot. That doesn't mean that you had the greatest character or could talk, but you could probably call some things in the ring and you could probably make it look good
mhm.
and not hurt anybody. That just was their method of training, which I still think was the best.
How was the atmosphere when the WWE pulled out? How much changed? Did anything really change with OVW, like training wise, or was it just a lot of, was it a bad time, good time? Was it the same?
I think it was. I'll just say this from my standpoint, from like the guys that I hung out with, like Blair Moan, Adonis, um, Brewski, Tom Wobbs, like those guys, like I guess he went on to be Rick Victor, but APOC then in OVW days, like no, we just had more opportunity. So
Hmm.
like it may have sucked for like Danny running the business, but for us, we didn't know any better. We were still paying, money to go to class, but then we had opportunities to like get in on the shows or cut a promo or, spend some time on the OVW show. And then it's like, okay, now because we're not, like he's still doing a show
Hmm.
like with just what he has now. So everybody like kind of had to step up. But you still had people that like were under contract that for whatever reason had been released or left and now coming back into the fold of OVW. So you'd still get those guys coming in that you could learn from. And of course, like Joey was still there, Amish Roadkill was still there. So you still had some guys that had been around that were able to give you advice. And then Lilas had been around in and around Rip and OVW forever. So not forever. I'm not dating him, but he'd been around for a long time. So, you just had guys that like got it better than I did. So everybody I was hanging out with or riding to the shows with had all been there longer. So I just like, for me, it was cool. It was just like, okay, I can just kind of hang out with these guys. We're all learning, but they learned a little bit. They've been here a little longer and we're all just kind of helping each other. And it was fun.
How long did you train versus when you started working these matches?
Probably like, I don't know, a couple months maybe in beginners, and then you have like a match in beginners, and then you go into intermediate. I had my first match against Joey on like an OVW show, TV show, and it was just kind of like a quick kind of squash, but he'd give me a little bit in there, but it was cool. Like, okay, I'm gonna have my first official in front of a
Hmm.
crowd or in front of a crowd in front of, on the show with Joey Mercury, and yeah, he was great. Yeah, it was just we didn't talk really about much about anything. He's kind of I listened and he kind of led everything, and it wasn't any more than 7, 8 minutes maybe, but it was just like, okay, let's see if I can listen, follow what he's saying, understand why he's doing what he's doing, and that kind of thing was like the most fun. But
Hmm.
yeah, a couple of months maybe.
During your time at OVW, did you create the character that you wanted to be? Did they help you give some input, or
Yeah,
was that all
well,
just you?
Ben we always called I'm going to use everybody's kind of gimmick name because that's just what we always did. But Ben Hameen, Ben Dur, he was sort of the writer for a lot of it. He would work on a lot of things. Him and I got along really well because I think we had similar backgrounds. And when it was like time to do promos, I would just try to bring something different. I'd try to like find odd quotations, try to be this learned, well-read brick. Can't go wrong with people hating that. So I was like, okay, what kind of spin can I put on that and get people to really dislike me and just some things to dip my
Hmm.
toes in and start to figure out a character. Okay, I can paint some broad strokes here on things that are hateable and things that can make, an audience dislike me, that's kind of easy. And then I can refine those and make them a little bit more sophisticated. So he was just like, oh, cool, you want to do that? Great. Let's come up, let's do this character. Let's do this sort of smarter than everybody, holier than thou. He told me, he's like, oh, go look at old like Nick Bockwinkel tapes. So I would like go look at them like, oh my God, this is awesome. This is great. And you don't want to just carbon copy. So it's like you take little things and you think, how do you make them your own in this smaller universe? But more than anything, it's just kind of to get comfortable so that you can, think on the fly, not just for promos, but in character in the ring too. So uh, actually it might be better. I think he just helped me flesh it out. I had some ideas when it was time to do promos in class. I would just try different things because I didn't care if it was bad. I was just like, oh, let's try. Maybe this will be funny, or maybe this can go somewhere. And then he just kind of helped put me in the right situations on the show. So yeah, again, it's just you find. I feel like you find guys that kind of understand where you're going and how you're trying to find yourself, and they're like, oh, I can help this guy. And he was like that for me.
Now, how long were you in OVW before you started pursuing W? I mean, you obviously went to OVW to pursue WWE,
Yeah.
but at what point did you like WWE pulls out, but they still have a
Hmm.
relationship with OVW?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, I mean, that was always a good thing to have. When did you decide that you were going to try out for WWE?
It was more of just like they were just kind of go have a full OVW tryout. So it wasn't like decide to go. Like I'd never gone up to a show. I just didn't think I hadn't been there more than a year and a half, maybe even less at that point. So I was not there long. I remember I did Rip's show one time and he's like, when you first got signed, were you ready? I was like, no, but what do you say? You don't tell
Hmm.
them no.
Hmm.
You just take whatever you've learned, try to keep your mouth shut and try to keep learning as much as you can once you get up there, because you're not going to be like, do I want a job up there? No. Not yet. You say yes and you figure it out. I mean, it was like, what else do you do? I remember telling Rip that at the time, and he was like, yeah, you go. You have to. So I wasn't there long, but they did like an all OVW tryout. Like they brought everybody in. Laurinaitis came down. I think he was the only one. But oh God, I we had Nick Dinsmore was teaching the beginners class at that point, so he was there. He was like on the OVW show again. So again, you got another guy that's just
Hmm.
solid as it gets, like in around the guys all the time, in the ring, having matches with us. So it's like, oh, this is great. So he had been there. Conway had come back, and he started kind of getting into the fold on the OVW show a little bit. God, Ryback had been back in the show a little bit. So you guys had some guys that had been up there coming back. So again, you're kind of like rubbing elbows with guys that knew a little bit more about that process, and then they just had a full on like tryout where just yeah, he came down, and then everybody kind of got in the ring, did some workouts, did a couple. Everybody did it was like everybody did six mans. So it was like a 3-on-3 just to get as many people in the ring as you can get, and then everybody cut a promo, and they hired like the next week at TV. They had hired me, Chris Pavone, Galen Croft, or Chris Cage, Ryback, and Brian Jossie, who would go on and do the Abraham Washington bit in FCW and then on the show. So we were the four, and that was like a week later. And I hadn't been there, I don't even think it was a year and a half. So for me, it was just like, okay, like you got signed. This was in the fall. I wasn't even going to report, I don't think, to Florida until like December. But yeah, it was crazy because it was just like I just felt like okay, I'm starting to get my legs under me and kind of figuring out how to have this character and how to build this and how to get better on TV and how to have better matches and think through things a little bit and have some flow and a lot of the things where it's just like okay, I'm kind of starting to not fully understand it and not get super proficient at it, but for where I was in length of time, I was feeling better about the progress. But also, I'm going to Rips class, and we're going to, we're doing shows all the time. It's wild. It's a lot of fun, but it's just, that's all we did. Like here, I'd be at work during the day and like looking at the clock, and then it'd be like running out of there, going to do the show or going to practice or whatever. So there were a lot of things. Everything was kind of geared at wrestling. Um, and then yeah, they did that tryout, and then we were, yeah, found out like the next week, the next Wednesday for TV tapings.
How was that
They had,
transition from OVW to FCW?
it was, it took a little bit of time. So OVW, um, like between Dinsmore and Rip, like the training there was really, really good. What you didn't always have was a ton of people to work with. It was a pretty decent sized roster, but it wasn't like when the contract guys were there. So it was like, I think that might have been the only thing it suffered there. But for the difference between OVW and FCW, like not a ton really. Like when you get to FCW, like obviously you're dealing with like signed guys.
Hmm.
So like it's another level usually of athleticism. You got some football players in there. You got guys that have been on the indies for a long time. You got really solid athletes, guys that were signed. And then you got some guys that you're like, what is going on here? Like that was at a point where Laurinaitis and those guys were just signing people. They saw like an 8x10 of somebody and sign them. And then it would show up like not that. It was almost like a joke. Everybody would be
Hmm.
like, what the hell? What are they doing? Like it wasn't well thought, like those guys weren't well thought of even then. Um, but no, like, but you had from a training standpoint, you had Dr. Tom Pritchard was like kind of the head trainer. He was great. He was awesome. He was great to me because he knew I came out of OVW and I think he liked Rip and I liked how Rip trained guys. So he knew, okay, fundamentally, you can probably not kill yourself. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, because they didn't know me from it. They just kind of I got signed from OVW after not having been there long. I hadn't trained anywhere else, so I had I think pretty good fundamentals for that amount of time in, and that's only because training the way Rip trains. So I
Hmm.
can't credit anything but Rip's philosophy. So Dr. Tom was awesome. Norman Smiley was there. He was great. He had all these different sort of chain wrestling techniques and sort of European transitions and different things like that that we hadn't been exposed to as much. We're doing a lot of we did a lot of like pick a body part, work the heat, work these different things, chain wrestle, but then you'd see some holds and some submissions from Norman that it's like, oh, whoa, this is awesome. But we had amazing guys in our development at that point. Like TJ Wilson was down there and Harry Smith was there. Uh, Joe Hennig. We had a lot of guys that were super talented. So it was like, oh, this is a whole different now. How do I measure up? Like, let me if I'm having matches with these guys, like it was fun because now you're in there with guys that had been there long enough, but also in developmental. So they started developing their own move set and how that related to their character. So now it's just like another level of fun because it just was that next level. But so those two guys were the like that sort of the head in terms of coaching. Um, Dusty ran the creative piece of it, which was unbelievable because everybody's a fan, and it was awesome to like have Dusty come over and work with you on a promo or tell you he liked part of your promo, and then give you suggestions, and then you're like, oh, that's just so much better than what I was going to say next. Yeah, let's do that. So there was that too. So to me, it was just like, oh wow, like training wise, it's like, okay, great. Can't do coming from like Joey and Rip, and now I've got Dr. Tom and Norman. It's like training wise, I just feel like perfect. This is just like this is a little bit different style, but same level of importance on mechanics, on telling the story, on slowing down. That was like the biggest thing for
Hmm.
everybody, just kind of going a little slower. Um, yeah, it was fun, man. It was great, and we practiced every day. A lot of bumps, a lot of matches, but that's how you got better. And then we do shows all over the south, all over Florida, all over the southeast. So we're based in Tampa. This is before NXT. This is strictly FCW. So we're in Tampa. Bunch of wrestlers hanging out in Tampa. Just kind of awesome. Is every as fun as it sounds. So you know, it it was just like it just went that next level up from OVW. It was just like okay, just because of the time and the dedication,
Hmm.
the the ring setup for the show was amazing. Like they had a cool little studio there and at the facility on Dale Mabry in Tampa. We did TV every Thursday night, 2 or 3 episodes, I think it was. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just like that. You could tell it was that next level. I'm sure it's nothing like NXT is today, but there's evolutions to things like OVW today isn't like OVW from
Hmm.
Jeffersonville, Indiana in 2000 is
Yeah.
different.
Hmm.
So like it was just that next kind of sophistication level up. it was unbelievable. Like it just I I don't think anybody's ready to go to developmental with a
Hmm.
year and a half in, but I felt like okay, I can keep my head above water just because again the foundation from those guys, and then just coming in with Tom and Dusty and Norman and those guys. Like Steve Kern kind of ran it, and I think he worked with some of like the further along guys that had been there a little longer that were ready to go up, like Drew and Sheamus. Like they were there too, so they were like ready to kind of go up. So I think
Hmm.
Steve Kern would work with those guys a little bit, but day to day, like working practice and house show matches, it was all like pretty much Dr. Tom and Norman, and they were great. I love those guys.
I was going to ask about Dusty because other people that came
Sure.
from OVW, they said that they didn't feel like they were welcomed into FCW because they weren't Dusty's kids necessarily. Like they felt like there was a
Um,
divide between OVW talent that was shipped in versus naturally signed FCW talent.
that might have been the case early on. I mean, when I was there, it had been probably a year. I
Hmm.
think there was respect for people that came out of OVW because of obviously the lineage of guys that came out of there and the
Hmm.
training, the level of training and the fundamental soundness of guys that come out of there. I didn't feel that way. I felt like Dusty was amazing to me. Dusty in no way had to spend time on me at that level, but he did. He would sit there and be like, "I like your promo. Why don't we try this?" Like I was just trying things as a bad guy. The God, what's his name? God, the Bernie Madoff stuff was going on, so I would try to like take little things like that. And kind of integrate that into some of my promos, and especially at house shows when Dusty would kind of let me go a little bit, and I could cut some promos and get a little deeper into it. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. And then he would put me in situations with like Brian, Abraham Washington. He was a good talker. Him and I could have like some back and forth. So yeah, no, I have zero complaints. Dusty was awesome to me, and he would take time and sit there and talk me through promos, and he had ideas for me and all these things. And I don't attribute that to anything other than the fact that I was like trying to find a character.
Hmm.
And then if he had ideas, sure, great. Let's integrate those. Let's figure out what we've got. I just tried to be like uh useful, I guess. I just knew that I was new, and I knew that I hadn't been in the business long, and I knew like, look, guys come back two or three times, guys get signed, released, come back. Like I was like, look, we're gonna do everything that we can during this period of time, and whatever happens, happens. But let's just make sure we're doing that, putting the effort in, and listening to these guys. So, no, Dusty was amazing to me.
Yeah, my next question was going to be like, did they let you have free range for your character? Or was it a mixture of stuff
Me,
on?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt so. I like had I like the thing Wednesdays was promo day. So you would go to the FCW arena and kind of line up, and everybody would get like a minute to cut a promo. And sometimes Dusty would like give you like notes and say, I want to go this way. Like I was there when Bray Wyatt cut his first promo that was sort of a taste of what we would get later. It's like in Dusty's eyes, it's like, ooh, we got something here. And he would do that with guys when they would come up with something very interesting. We can take this and build this into something. So my first day cutting a promo, and then I would just try to cut these promos sort of similar to what I was doing, but then trying to get maybe a little meaner, more intense with them. And then, yeah, he liked it. And then I was factored in on TV more and more and talking, doing a lot of talking, a lot of promos. And uh, he would put me with some guys that were newer, but like good athletes, like Ian Richardson, Troy Jackman at the time. He and I were in a tag team, and we didn't really have anything in common. We were just kind of thrown together, but we made it work. Like, I would kind of talk. He was big, like just like 6'7", 6'8", giant guy. Um, but we had a really good sort of chicken shit heel,
Hmm.
monster heel kind of back and forth, which worked for us. And Dusty would put me in situations like that. He let me do some commentary when my neck was starting to get screwed up, and yeah, he always found opportunities. He would give me opportunities. So yeah, I always felt that yeah, he was very interested in letting people like people would have their every single person got to cut a promo on promo day. And if you prepared, you worked on it, and you tried to like some guys wouldn't work on it. Some guys would just sit there and cut the same promo every week. Other guys would try to like dig deeper. Like, okay, what did I talk about last week? Let me try to keep something moving forward here because I think it's like that was just as important as doing the drills.
Hmm.
Like there were guys that would just thought because if they came from the Indies or they had a certain size or stature that they could just do whatever, Dusty would just tell them what to say. Sometimes I guess, but I didn't see that. Like guys had to work and come
Hmm.
up with their characters, and then he would jump in and add because nobody created what Bray Wyatt would become. He was starting to do that stuff in like 2010, 2009, just cutting these promos. And then it would just be like, whoa, that was awesome. Because I'd worked, because they had done this thing where it's like, they're like kind of these backwoods Florida roughneck kind of characters, he and his brother. And then one day he's cutting these promos, he's getting kind of into this mythology. And it's like, whoa, this is awesome. And then Dusty, of course, like, let's go. So everybody, at least the guys I thought really wanted to do something, were always trying to find whatever nugget they could bring, and then have Dusty and Creative be like, "Oh, okay, cool, we can build something around that." So you're just trying to throw shit at the wall every week and give them ideas. So that's how I treated it, and I was factored in. I was always factored into something.
So did you like doing the commentary? Did you like doing the different stuff like that, or was it? You said your
Yeah, I
your
wasn't.
neck was hurt.
I wasn't great when I did commentary. I liked it, but I'm just a Heenan mark, so it was just like, what can I say to pop the guys that are watching? I was just trying to like Kayla Croft, and I would always joke. I would be like, "Oh, I found this gem that Heenan used. I'm gonna try and crowbar it in on commentary." It was just kind of that shit. But that was fun. Look, again, I just wanted to do, you know, if I could find some kind of avenue to get some creative stuff out there and get some, give Dusty an idea.
Hmm.
And I know he had some ideas, and yeah, it was cool. It was like because it was just such a level up. Again, not NXT what that is today, I'm sure, but from like Davis Arena to there, it was a difference,
Oh, for sure.
So it was fun, and then just then getting those chances to cut promos, I would just try to make sure I could always cut a promo before matches, just to kind of practice, get a little bit, try to read the crowd a little bit, get more of those opportunities, which they were always giving people chances to do that.
Is there any particular moments that stand out more than others in FCW for you?
Yeah, yeah, there's a couple. My first day there was funny because like you come in and I guess some people felt not welcomed from OVW, but by the time I got down there, it was like whoever's coming in new is going to get like I don't want to say haze because it wasn't that, but like people, yeah, you get a little like you're the new guy and you get a little, screwed with a little bit. But I was like, okay, cool. It's just a locker room. It's just not, it's like anything else. So, I never felt out of place or anything because it's just like ultimately you're going to work with these guys either in practice or on shows. So it's like if you can trust them and they can trust you and you guys are working together, everybody's going to be fine. That's
Hmm.
kind of how it was. It's like you take kind of you know, the ribbon and you take it, you take it with, you know, you be good natured about it. And then, when it's time to get in the ring, you don't hurt anybody. You try to do the best you can. My first day, Dusty just threw me in the ring to have a quick match. I think they're just seeing. It was more like let's see what the new guys because sometimes they're brutal. Sometimes you get a new guy, throw him in a match. But then another time, like Rick Victor came down because he got signed. He was coming down for a tryout, and he did a match with TJ, which was just like I was just like, whoa, that's awesome. He's got to see that badass match, and this is just practice. But my first day, Dusty's like, "Oh, why don't you get in there?" I got in the ring with Drew, and I met Drew a little bit from OVW because he was there, but he'd been around longer. He
Hmm.
was still young. He was young then, but he'd been around for a long time. And Dusty goes, "Enjoy your ass whooping, kid." And I was like, "Yes, sir." So I got in the ring, and we just had a match. And obviously, like you know, uh, Drew just called it. I listened. He knew that coming from Rip's class, that I could not. I didn't have two left feet that I could do you know,
Hmm.
I could have a match with them there. And we did. It was a fine little thing. And it was cool. And I think after this, like, okay, yeah. And they later on, they broke the class. They broke the whole training up into like guys that were sort of newer. Like you'd have, again, this at this point in time, you get guys that were hired from, college football or all over the place, which cool. And then on the other class, I think they divided it almost into, yeah, sort of the newer guys and then the more advanced guys. I got placed in the more advanced with more advanced guys, and I credit that all to just the type of training, and then I could just go in and I wouldn't hurt anybody, and I was pretty fundamentally I was okay, and I could have ended up having like a lot of house show matches with some of the newer guys, just trying to, and that was at Tom's. Dr. Tom would do that, and that was more just like, okay, just get this guy to slow down. Let's see, just you're not going to hurt him. Let's just see what this guy can do. I trust you to work with him. Tell me how it was a cool spot to be in because I just wanted to work anybody.
Hmm.
For me, it's like I will get better by working with guys that tell me, shut up, listen, slow down, loosen up. But also for a couple of times when I don't want to say veteran, but when I'm the more seasoned person in the ring with somebody newer, you get put in a position to have to lead too. So it was two sides of the coin there, which for me was like the best way to do it. That's how I learned. That's
Hmm.
how I've always learned after that. So that was really cool. But
When
one of
you
my favorite moments, sorry,
No, you're fine.
I was deviating from your question, but
You're fine.
one of my favorite moments was we did this outdoor fair, and it was like uh it was like a it was like this Mexican American like heritage festival. It was like an outdoor fair. It was like an hour or two outside of Tampa. It was super hot that day, like over 100. The ring was hot. And we had to do like they divided the team, like one group was doing a show over here, one group was doing a show over there. And I remember I was wrestling Brett DiBiase, and we were just talking like, this is gonna suck because it's gonna be so hot and the mat's gonna be hot. I was like, well, let's cut a promo because we had to do like 20 to 30 minutes because half of the like we had to make time and half of the so we were only doing like 3 or 4 matches. So I cut a promo, I think, for like 5 to 10 minutes, just talking trash. Just like I had an old work badge that I had from a day job, and just found it in like a suit jacket. So I'm kind of wearing this. I'm talking to everybody about, you know, why they have to leave. Like it was total like old school heat. Like, oh, I'll pretend I'm from the INS, or I'll talk shit like I'm here to kick people out of the country, which just it wasn't like it wasn't trying to be like ham-handed with it, but I would just be like kind of talk very like matter of factly about, look, I hope you guys enjoy this match because right after, like you guys have to go. We can't do this. Like just like screwing with them. And then Eric Escobar, who was hurt, but he was doing ring announcing. He spoke Spanish. I did not. So he would translate what I was saying into something ridiculous. And then the people would kind of laugh and I'd be like, what are you doing? What'd you say? This isn't funny. And then we just do that for like 10 minutes, just having fun. And people are throwing stuff. And then Brett came out there, beat the crap out of me for the beginning of the match, and people are going crazy. It was just fun. It was just like exactly. It wasn't the greatest circumstances. There weren't many people there. It was a WWE developmental show, but it didn't look like it. But it was just one of those moments that was just a lot of fun. But I mean, we had bigger shows in Florida State Fair, and there were a million. But it was just moments like that where you can really have a little bit of freedom. I guess house shows really now or
Hmm.
these days or the last 10 years are really when you can really kind of have some freedom and play around. So that was just a chance to kind of, we're not doing the TV show with the tight timelines. We're not, somewhere where there's 10 matches on the card and we got to go. Like this one particular situation where you can just kind of play around and see what you can get out of the crowd and see the reactions. And we just played old school bad guy, and here comes the white meat baby face, Brett DiBiase, full of fire, and they loved him. So it was cool. Just those little situations where you could be a prick and talk some shit. And Eric was great because he was just like sort of making fun of me while I was saying all these terrible things, and then Brett comes in and uh, we have I think we probably went 15 minutes, and then we did about 10 minutes of bullshit. And it was like, but for a day that was like 105, 110 degrees out, I thought we still gave him a good show.
When your release came, were you still being used regularly, or is this something
All the
that?
time, yeah, no, all the time. I think it was one back then. You would have these waves of like sort of unexplained, like it's like a churning. It'd be like, okay, here's just a wave of guys will release. We'll bring a wave of guys. It just felt like every couple of months you'd get like a wave. And when I had been there, like we had seen a lot of guys kind of come and go. And a lot of guys would just kind of go back to OVW or go back to all the indies or whatever. Like releases didn't really mean anything was over. It was just kind of like like I got dropped on my head in OVW. It was like a dark match before TV, and started having some neck problems. And this was like a couple months before my signing, and I never did anything because I was just like, we'll just
Hmm.
go and wrestle and we'll figure this out. I took like a couple days off, and then it just started getting worse and worse and worse. So the time I left kind of corresponded with that just getting kind of falling apart. Um, but no, I mean, I think that the week before we did three TV tapings. We did 3 hours of TV tapings, and I think I wrestled on each of them. We were in a tag team title feud with the Wyatts, so like we were working all the time. I just don't think that at that point, I don't think like Laurinaitis' team was paying much attention to at least the television on FCW. I think they had their eye on like a couple of guys that they were bringing up. Sheamus was going up at that point, Drew was going up at that point, and I think everybody else was. It was a period of time where like a lot of guys looked alike.
Hmm.
It was that sort of like cookie cutter kind of time frame where yeah, again, a lot of guys looked similar and it was just easy to kind of just get stuck in that mold. Now obviously it's a much more uh, I just think wrestling's got back to, at least in WWE, in the development, like characters in the sense of like you can have all shapes and sizes
Hmm.
as long as that person can go and as long as that person can captivate an audience, whatever. Like it's just different. Then it was like, all right, we want guys that are over 6 feet and they look jacked. They look like they came out of an Abercrombie ad and da 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 da. And then we want the girls that look like they just stepped out of a Victoria's Secret ad. That was like the
Hmm.
Laurinaitis kind of mindset back then. So um, I feel like yeah, I mean, when I came in, I went back with three guys that had already been signed before, which was Chris Cage, Ryback, and Brian Jossie. I don't think he'd been signed before, but he's close. So I had no designs on that being like I just thought go back, because I was so new. I hadn't been doing
Yeah.
it that long. So I was just like, okay, well, go back to the drawing board. But it was an amazing experience.
So what was your next move after your release?
So after that, I was in Tampa. My fiance and I met her when I was wrestling. So she lived in Tampa. We met. We moved to LA after that. And then my whole thought was like, I'll get back into the Indies. I'll get a job. I'll get my neck fixed and I'll get my neck looked at and everything else. Cause back in FCW, like if you got hurt there, they're going to take care of you if you get hurt in the ring. If you're sick or if you get into a car accident on the way, you're not under any insurance, so you might be screwed. I didn't mention that I had a thing. I just figured like we'll deal with it and I'll come back, whatever. So no, I just ended up we moved to LA, we liked it, and I started doing different things. And then I think like the enthusiasm for it, I think started waning as I just kind of fell out of being a fan for a little
Hmm.
while again. So I stopped kind of thinking about it and just moved on to whatever was next. And then it took me a couple of years to be like, oh wow, I kind of just went in this other direction and started a family or doing all this and then would look I didn't like I watch more now than I did for
Hmm.
probably for the last couple of years than even when I was watching at the time. Because I remember like when I was in FCW, I loved our show. I loved what we were doing, but I wasn't particularly loving the WWE product at that
Hmm.
time, 2009, 2010. I think by that point I don't really remember what it was. It was a lot of the same. It was a Cena era and he's great and all the guys up there were great, but it just wasn't the kind of captivating programming that made me want to go there. And then when I'm there, and then when I left, it was just I wasn't as interested in it anymore. I'm interested in it more so, now that I have kids, and I also think it's like another sort of renaissance period
I
now
agree.
versus like the late 2000s and early 2010s. It was just
Hmm.
kind of faded into the background, I think, at least for me. But yeah, I went to LA and then I started, working at this job that took me all over the country, and I think kind of just went in a corporate direction and did different things there. And now I live in the Bay Area uh, as of the last couple of months, and it's been great. But man, it is something that everybody always wants to talk about because just being in that world, that WWE
Hmm.
world, it's yeah, it was awesome. It
So
was awesome.
so life after WWE has been great.
Life after WWE's been good, man. Yeah, it's been good. I still talk. talked to a lot of guys that I worked with in OVW and FCW. Cage, I still call him. He's still on my phone as Cage, but Chris Pavone, Kalen Croft, and I text quite a bit. He's hilarious, and yeah, he had a couple of runs there. Ryback and I were roommates in Florida when we both got signed. He's cool. He was always just yeah, really interesting guy. A lot of yeah, really thoughtful guy, smart. But yeah, it was just crazy characters, and then you kind of take that with you. And I love now. It's like again, not it's in this sort of renaissance, not just because of the product, but also like what got me back into it was always my favorite, which was hearing stories from people and their time on the road and how they learned that. That's why there's podcasts I listen to now that it's just like I love because it's just as close as you can get to going back to those days when you're sitting in the car from one town to another. And maybe you know shit, maybe you don't. Most of the time I didn't know, but you just kind of listen, you talk through things, and I just feel like that's how you really appreciate it.
Hmm.
So I was just yeah, you miss those times. But it was fun. And there's so many outlets now, your show, others, where people talk about what got them into it and what was the most impactful part of it. Um, had thousands of matches and those were all fun, but to me, it's like those little moments where Dusty's got an idea, so we're gonna go try to make that work, or you got 25 minutes to kill this thing, go out, talk some shit, and try and get these people to hate you. Ooh, that'll be fun. Let's do that. That sounds good. So it's yeah, it was great. I am the only thing I feel jealousy about is just like what I've heard the facility is like at NXT. It just sounds like it's just like world, of course, and it should be, and it always should have been. And I mean, it's all relative to where you are. To me, FCW was like, well, this is great. To me, OVW just being in OVW is like, okay, great, this is OVW. So this is serious. This is
Hmm.
where guys who changed the game started. So I think it was just like I like to think I always had a healthy appreciation for it wherever I was.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Um, Keep a notebook. Be, Write down your ideas and run them by people. Like always throw. I think that's where like guys would miss the boat. Like guys that had like the greatest physical gifts. You'd see guys that were just the greatest, and their promos would just be lazy, or they wouldn't do much, or they wouldn't. It's like, man, if you get that part of it, you're unstoppable.
Hmm.
Like they'll teach you to wrestle, they'll teach you to work. Like if you can find part of you that will resonate and that make people want to watch you, yeah, I think that would be what I would just tell them to always be thinking about what your character is and what your character can be and throw ideas out. Just have ideas. They may be shitty. They probably will be, but you'll find something. Like I think that's really the only way to find real success is if you're in a like promo classes and you got guys, whether it's Dusty or whether it's whoever, and if they're investing time to listen to you come up with a character and they want to help you because you're on a show, that's a gift. Like
Hmm.
be working at that.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you for taking a little time out today.
Yeah, Brian, for sure, man.
Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling. I appreciate everything that you've done. It was growing up in Southern Indiana, OVW has always held a special place in my heart. I'm from where Rip
It's the
Rogers is
greatest.
from.
OVW is the greatest. It's the best. Anybody who came out of there, you always had guys trusted you more.
Hmm.
Like coming into FCW, like everybody's people that are new, like yeah, but if you came out of OVW, they would be like, oh, okay, cool, this guy can hang, and that's all Rip. It's just muscle memory coming from Rip's class.
Hmm.
That's like the great that's the best thing. If that helps so many more guys than people will ever really know.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this,
Yeah, dude,
especially before the
appreciate it,
holidays
man.
and
Of
everything.
course.
If there's ever anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out.
Sure. Yeah, Brian, I appreciate it. I enjoyed the talk, and I like what you do, and I like hearing everybody's sort of journeys to it and after. And look, it's people that get to do it for any amount of time. It's very fortunate.
I could not agree
So
more, sir.
yeah,